So I had created a video that talked a little bit about cults and religion, and I want to kind of bring something to some kind of maybe a bit of a distinct and maybe clear difference so that we can understand why the two may look similar but are actually very, very different. So, as I mentioned before, religion often involves some kind of devotion to a divine, something that involves belief in oneness, trying to be a monotheist, which means I am not relying on anything giving me any kind of assistance outside of God. So if I'm in my mind giving a person some kind of power to say, I want you to be able to do this for me outside of myself. So in my heart, right? So let's pretend I'm waiting for the bus and there's somebody who's on their phone and in my mind, I'm like, oh, I hope they can, cancel, I don't know, some kind of online viral trend for me, right? My mind right now is not giving power to an above source, like a divine source, which people call God. It's giving it to this person who has a divine spirit in him, obviously, but he's ultimately powerless, right? To help me or to harm me. If I call on God, then it's like God has the source of creating causes in the world that will help me affect the goal that I'm working towards, right? So in my mind, I could say, I hope this person has the means to achieve what my prayer is. But in my mind, I'm calling on God. I'm like, God, please help me end this viral trend that seems to be causing more problems than it is solving them. So you can ask, well, what is the problem? So what I'm trying to understand too at the same time is the creation story before Adam was created. All we know is that there's jinn and there's destruction all over the earth. So you can think, okay, so jinn are existed before Adam. They already existed, and we know that they are a creation that exists on some realm. And we don't really know much about them, other than that we shouldn't play with them as it is, or like almost call or try to find a medium to play with the dead. And then we can just leave it at that. Now, some people, they might not know that this is an ancient practice that should be stopped because all they know is that it affects a certain goal. And because they don't know that this is maybe not a healthy desire, they just try to play with it anyway because they just think, well, it creates an end. It is almost like God, maybe something to supplement God. But the idea is, if I see somebody who is worshiping God in his devout practice, has a devout practice to kind of bring some kind of meaningful understanding of the universe, then I might think, wow, this person has some kind of answered prayer with God, right? So then you might think, well, instead of me, like this person now calling on God, the same way that I am, they'll say, I want this person to lose themselves, move forward. I'm going to become them, and then I'm just going to have whatever, answered prayer they had. Now God is saying, you're now giving this person a sense of that they're God, and you forgot about God himself. So now this person is now helpless. Like God's like, okay, well, I'm sorry. It's not that God has abandoned this person, but it's almost like now, because they have such belief in God, God's using them to actually show these people a lesson. And because they know that we're going to be patient and our patience is rewarded. I mean, yeah, they might get angry, they might get upset, they might wonder, like, why did the world just change on its axis? Like, there's so much confusion now. But it's almost like because they have belief in God, they're just willing to wait and be patient. Now, because that person's gone now, I'm going to call her Janice, okay? So Janice was already someone who was devout, and she was practicing, and she understands that because I understand from narrations that God says, if you pray to me and do extra prayers, I will come to love you. And if I love you, I'm going to make the world easy for you. Okay. Now, there's somebody else whose name is Katie. Now, Katie comes along and she sees Janice and she's like, I understand something from my ancestors that tells me if I move Janice one step further and say, pretend I'm going to call her Carrie, then Carrie doesn't actually exist. There's no person named Carrie, but I'm just going to pretend that I'm going to put a chair, I'm going to label it Carrie, and I'm going to put Janice there as though she exists there. And I'm going to steal Janice's actual identity as Katie. And now there's two people that are missing, right? Now I'm going to assume that, well, whatever Janice had in her life, I can now do. And I'm going to trick people and say, oh, look, 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 I'm Janice. I can do everything that Janice could do. But people are like, if they are connecting all on the internet and they don't see that as an actual person you've changed, they won't think any different. They'll be like, oh, all right, I know Janice. But now it's Katie. They don't know. Now, what happened to Katie is if she had a chance to understand something about God, right now, because she made another person a god, she's now a polytheist, which means she's an idolater. She made a god outside of God. So she created kind of like a partner with God, meaning that she thinks that this person can create some kind of benefit for her over and above what God can. Now, what we don't understand about that is if we're asking on God. So if Katie, let's go back. So this is Janice and Katie's over there before this all happened. If Katie was to understand that if I'm praying for something and it's not coming to life or it's not really happening or it's not being fulfilled, then we have to understand that it's because God knows that what you're praying for right now isn't good for you. So if you're praying to marry somebody and that person ends up in the future, maybe losing his job, maybe not being the kind of person you thought you wanted to spend a lot of time with, but he knew that Katie actually wanted to maybe have a relationship that would last for a very long time, then God would say, I'm not going to give you this prayer yet. I'm going to wait until somebody else is ready to get married, and then maybe you two will meet, and then you'll have that kind of life that you're hoping for, that you thought would be good with, let's pretend his name is John. So God will say, nope, John is not good for you because I know in the long run, he's not going to actually have the life that you think you want with him. Instead, let's wait for Jake. Right? So Jake isn't ready to get married yet. Maybe he's still studying, maybe he's working. And when he decides that he's been working for a long time in one job, he's like, no, 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 I want this other job. And it turns out that Katie actually likes the new job that he's going to have, not the one that he currently has. So as it would end up that Katie and Jake would get married. But because Katie wasn't patient and she keeps praying and praying, she's like, why isn't God answering my prayer? And she's like, well, I know Janice has answered prayer. She just seems to have all this good luck. So she's like, I'm just going to steal her identity and then I'll find John. Because she doesn't know about Jake yet. So she ends up stealing Janice's identity. Now Janice is gone as somebody else. Who even knows what her name is now? It's not Katie, because Katie's like, I'm hiding somewhere over here. I'm pretending to be Janice and Katie at the same time. And I'm going to go find John. So she goes to find John, and then she ends up finding out that, oh, he's not actually what I wanted anyway, and he doesn't even like me, and he doesn't like Janice. So now she's stuck. And God's like, well, I can't forgive you because look, you just messed up almost 4 and 5 people's lives just by doing that one thing and being impatient and not knowing how to delay gratification. This is almost like what is called with Jinn, is like she just created almost like a ghost of a person. She left her own ghost behind, and now she's trying to create all this mess. And it's really hard to know what this is because words actually have an effect in the universe. So if I have an intention to say I want to trick somebody and that person actually doesn't deserve to be tricked, now that that is in the world, somebody who actually did a bad action somewhere else is going to have to deal with that trick, because God says there is cause and effect in the world. So let's pretend somebody else was walking and they for some reason had a really mean intention about somebody else. Then God will say, well, this ghost of Janice, she doesn't deserve to be tricked by Katie, but now this other person that maybe pushed somebody is going to get that trick. Now they're going to be confused about something and they're going to think, oh, I think I want to love Katie. And then they end up loving Katie, but then they decide, whoa, and then they just get in a fight and then they don't have healthy ideas about love and then their relationships dissolve and then it just made another bigger mess. So you can understand now why God says the very first thing that we have to understand in life is to only think about God as one being that has all the power in the world. People don't actually have power. God gives them power because he says, if you try to worship God, I will help you in the world. And the only way to be helped is if you have God's power with you to help you understand how to get inspiration, how to think about how to build a strong body, how to understand like new things that you're learning in school and how to apply that in the world. So if I learn math, when I leave school, what can I do with math? Do I like math enough to want to actually, study how to build a kind of technology? And then I might find, yeah, actually, so then you'll go into some kind of job that helps you build programs, maybe for computers or for cell phones. Right? So this is all God giving you all this talent and helping you use your brain and your heart in a healthy way. Because you understand that, yes, I need to help people and people can help me, but they can only help me to a point. And that's why I pray. It's almost to remind myself that God is the only one that I want to remain devoted to, which means the only one that I worship to. Even if I don't see him, I know he sees me because he's the one that created me. So if we backtrack now and we say, well, Katie changed her mind. She decided that, you know what, this is wrong. This is idolatry, and I shouldn't be assuming that somebody outside of God can help me. So then she thinks, okay, I'm going to somehow have to give Janice back her life. I don't know how to do that. So she might decide, if I do that now, I'm actually might get in trouble with the police, because stealing someone's identity is actually not safe. It's not healthy in the world, because it confuses everything. People have to go to their bank. They have to fix everything. They have to go get their identity, like their ID picture retaken. Like everything gets really confusing moving forward. So then she might change her mind again and be like, why don't I just give Janice a new identity, like her ghost? I'll pretend now she's John. So then she goes and she says, well, since John and Janice almost seem to like each other, maybe I'll try to do that. So now John's confused. Janice is confused. She's like, I don't even know who John was. What does he want? And now it's a bit confusing, because he's like, I thought I knew something about you. And she's like, I don't even know who you are. Why do you think you know me? And then he'll think back about, like, wait, weren't you the person I was talking to? And she's like, no. And that's why one of the things that I think are difficult with the advance of technology is these robots, things that can almost read our mind, but not read our mind. It's actually reading our face and assuming, oh yeah, I know this person. And then you think back and be like, yeah, this is what I remember about this person. And then you think, yeah, it's safe. I already know this person because I met them. And then you think, yeah, nothing's really changed. But really, it's not the same person anymore. And what that's called impersonation. It means I'm pretending to be somebody else without that other person knowing, and without the person I'm talking to knowing. So it's a trick. It's kind of cheating. And the Prophet Muhammad, he used to say that. He said, whoever cheats is not from among those who God loves. And we want to be people who God loves, because then we have success in the world. We're not always stuck being frustrated or not able to do anything beneficial in the world. If we can't do anything beneficial in the world, then what's the point of living? Right? It just becomes a very, very difficult life. Nobody wants to work with us. Nobody wants to like us. Nobody wants to be friends with us. Our life just becomes really stuck. And it's just like, that's what people call hell. It's not a place where we burn, but it's just a very, very frustrating way of living, that you almost start to wonder about these big questions in a negative way. Like, why did God create us? It's not fun. And then you almost want people to feel sorry for you, but then you have to think, but I'm the one that started by making a really bad choice. And then you have to think of going backwards. And then you have to think, no, I have to be honest and tell Janice what I did. And that's the only way to fix it. Because God says, I'm not going to forgive you until the person that you made a mistake with forgives you. Then I can forgive you. So then it's almost like God's actually allowing that person to have that kind of power where they say, well, how would I decide to forgive you, and why should I? Like, how am I going to be sure that you're not going to do this again? And then that's where they can say, well, I guess I'm going to have to go to the police and tell them that this is what I did. And in doing that, it's taking responsibility, because it allows people in government and civilization to know that there are these loopholes that we maybe didn't notice that can exist, and we have to fix them. We have to almost close them up so that they don't continue to exist in the future. So sometimes what happens is, sometimes we watch movies, like Ocean's 11 was a movie that came out a long time ago, and it's a heist. It's a movie about people who are mad at one person, so they decide to get back at him in some way. So he's a very, very rich man. He has a casino, and they think, we're gonna steal his money, and they think it's a really good idea because, I don't know, for some reason they all got mad at each other, and that's what people who are mad at do. They always just try to pick fights with each other. So, I mean, I'm not going to say if this is right or wrong. God tells us that sometimes if you make money in a way that tricks people, you're not going to really be able to enjoy that money. You're just going to lose it all the time. So it's just going to frustrate you. So that's where we can understand the reason sometimes God gives us rules in scripture is to almost allow us to know what's an ethical way of living and what are new ways of understanding an ethic. So if we live in a world right now where you can make a lot of money by reinvesting money. Some people will say there are safe investments, there are unsafe investments, and you have to try to figure out which one is safe. And that's what you want to invest in, because then it'll keep your money safe, and it won't allow people who have these tricks in mind to come and actually grab onto you, and then you lose your money. So let's pretend I go to Janice and I say, Janice, I'm really, really sorry that I pretended to be you, and I think I tricked somebody and I made them think that you were all these things and it's not really true. So then she'll think, oh, well, thank you for telling me. Hopefully she's someone who forgives Katie. But then she has to go backwards and say, oh no, who are all the people I know now that I have to actually go and reach out to and maybe talk to and say, if in the past somebody tried to reach out to you and tried to sell you something, it wasn't me, it was somebody else. So she has to go back to all the people that she knew and try to make sure that, if I did something against you in some way and you thought it was me, it might have been somebody else, and I apologize. Please let me know so I can see if I can fix it. Now, people who might have said, yeah, we want to do business with you, and then decide, oh, it wasn't actually you, and now where did our money go, right? So hopefully that actually fixes things so that people who thought this was like an honest transaction and then realized no, it wasn't, in some way God's able to actually keep their money safe so that they don't actually lose or miss out on what they thought was an honest transaction, because their faith wasn't to trick. They didn't think they were being tricked, and in doing so God's almost saying, because you are trying to rely on an honest intention, I'm going to help you almost keep something that is valuable to you from being lost. So this is one way of saying that it's sort of like a blessing. And the way, remember, we talked about things in our life being blessed, is to be charitable always, just to always have a way of giving when your life is in a good situation before it gets kind of difficult. So the only way I know how to understand this is with people who try to understand religion and God, but it's something that's almost new to them. And the only thing they know about religion is that if you pray, your prayer is going to be answered. But they don't think that we have to wait for time, because we almost have to wait for the universe to align in a certain way to make that prayer come true. So let's say I'm praying for $1 million. And God says, okay, I'll get you that $1 million, but first we have to make sure that there's a time in the world where it's easy to make that much money in a very small amount of time, because you want that money not to be like one in a trick somehow that just stole someone's money without them knowing, right? You want it to be an honest amount of earning so that it actually sustains itself in your life, and it doesn't actually cause you to like buy a new car and then get in an accident and you lose your legs. It's like, well, that $1 million was kind of actually a curse instead of a blessing. So it's in this way that we almost have to wait for time. So another answer was, well, what if I don't get it at all? So some people will say, yeah, it could be. Maybe in this lifetime, if you get $1 million, it's actually going to be something that isn't healthy for you, because you could lose a lot of friends. So maybe that you have friends that don't have that much money, and if they see that you have that much money, they'll be like, hey, come, let's lend me this much money, or let's go live over there, in this other country, or let's go travel. And that's not something that you wanted to do anyway. So what are you supposed to do? Like, this is something that I earned, and this is something that's for me, and I should be able to choose what I want to do with it. But now you're making me feel guilty because you're my friend, but you think that we should do this together. But are you really my friend if you're not really listening to what my wants are? Like, I don't mind listening to what your wants are. We can do some things together, but in the end, we should be able to do things together, and I should be able to choose and be allowed to choose without feeling like I have to worry about your feelings. So a lot of people say this, is that sometimes when people earn a lot of money or they win a lot of money, all of a sudden they have friends come up from everywhere, right? Like, they might be true friends, they might not be. It's very hard to say. But in that case, it's almost like, well, God knows. Like, he'll say, maybe in this lifetime, it's not really good for you to have that much money. Maybe in the next life. So after you die and then you wake up in the next life, maybe it'll be a safer time because you'll have a new group of friends. You'll have a new understanding of the world. And maybe having a lot of money or not having that much money, it doesn't matter. You'll have a better life anyway, and maybe a better circle of friends. Another is that God won't give you $1 million, but he'll give you a job and a life that you like, that will make it feel like you have that much money, even if you don't. So in that way, it's almost having that trust in God. It's not blind trust, but it's almost a faith that if I'm asking for something, I know that the person that I'm asking, or the God that I'm asking, has knowledge of the future and has the power to know that I can allow this person to almost be content and satisfied with the answer without questioning whether or not I exist. So if I say, let's pretend I'm God, and you're a 20-year-old girl or boy, and you're saying you believe in God because everything in life sort of validates for you that there's a God in the universe that's holding everything together. And you're praying like, God, I really want to graduate with this degree let's pretend it's a degree in arts. So you want to go into acting. So God's like, okay, so he lets you go into a year, you go into first year, second year, third year. And then that last year, for some reason, you're unable to continue with your courses. You feel really sick. Something happens in your family where you can't go to school. And you start to feel really mad. You're like, I'm praying for this semester or for this final year to just get by, like, so that I can just finish and then I can find a job and I can just move on with my life. But for some reason, you have to pause. So you end up saying, okay, well, I guess I'm just going to have to drop out of school and maybe take a year off and then I'll come back and finish after. Now, because you did that, it ends up being that God is almost reassuring you. Like he wants you to be reassured that I'm actually leaving something better for you. And I hope you trust me in that. So usually the person will say, there has to be a bigger purpose. Like there has to be a reason why I can't finish my degree. So they take a year off. Maybe they work for a little bit, they travel, and then they end up loving where they travel to. And then they think, wow, I just found out that if I travel to, let's say, Belgium, uh, in Belgium, I can actually create a partnership with the university I was studying in Canada, for example, and I can finish my last year here, and then I can find a job here in Belgium, and I don't have to go back there. So it's almost like God replaced something that you really wanted with something better because you had that faith. It's almost like, are you trusting God to make a better choice for you? And just to kind of delay gratification, to just wait and see. Like, if you're asking for something, it's going to be responded to in one way or another. You just have to kind of have that faith and trust that, okay, I'm pretty sure there's going to be something better waiting for me if I'm willing to give this up for the universe. Like, there's got to be a better option for me out there. So it might be that, in Belgium, there's more jobs with an arts degree than there is in Canada. It could be that the job in Belgium will be something that you loved way more than anything you would have found in Canada. Maybe it pays better, so then you end up having a better life, right? All of these things help us almost reassure ourselves that there is a purpose in our prayers not being answered right away. And even with technology almost allowing us to take shortcuts, we still have to understand that time and nature don't take shortcuts. So if I plant a tree, I can't expect it to grow overnight. I actually, I think in grade one, we were given these little boxes that had seeds in them to plant a tree. And for some reason, I didn't know that it would take almost like 25 years to grow a tree. In my mind, I was like, it probably doesn't take that long. And then when I read the box when I got home, I was like, it it felt so disheartening for me. I don't know why it made me feel sad that it would take that long. I was like, what's the point? And now that I think back, I was like, I wonder what that's like for little kids who feel like they have to wait such a long time to get something. But it was also a really good example for me to think back at, like now as an adult, is that sometimes we do have to be patient with knowing how to learn about something. So if I want to make $1 million, what is it that I have to do to earn that much money? Maybe it's I have to find a job that I like, because if I find a job that I don't like but makes a lot of money, I might not be a person who makes that money in an ethical way. I might find shortcuts, and then my life's not happy. The money I make might not make me happy, might make me even more sad than if I didn't have that money or that job. So just remembering that sometimes in nature, the reason we want to align with it is that it helps us understand that things take time. Building a house takes time, right? You can't just build it overnight. Even if, like right now, you see that sometimes, especially with skyscrapers, when you're driving on the highway, you'll see these really big flatbeds that carry like they're almost like Lego pieces of really big structures that, these cranes can kind of come and just almost collapse them on each other and almost help create what the big building is going to be at the end. It's still a very long time before the actual structure is complete. It takes years. So knowing that from a young age is almost like, okay, when I do make a plan, I have to be realistic about how long this is going to take me to achieve this plan. And what I can do is if I say, my plan is supposed to, come to fruition or supposed to materialize in 1 year, right? So maybe it's, I want to save enough money to buy a laptop, right? So then you can say, okay, I need 1 year. So let's say you need to save $1,000. So then you can think, okay, what am I going to do in a year to help me save $1,000? You can say, well, maybe I can ask my parents for an allowance. If you're young, you can say, if I clean my room, if I help around the house with like taking out the recycling every week, if I help with keeping the house tidy, like in our playroom. If I help set the table at dinner time, can I get an allowance of $100? They might say, sure. Now, if you think $100 every week, you can make $1,000 very easily because you just need to wait for about 10 weeks. But then you might think, I want to spend some of that money and I want to save some of that money. So then it won't be so bad. You'll think, yeah, that's cool. I can save some of the money and then I might be able to buy that laptop sooner than a year. So you have these little mini goals that help you reach that big goal. And now it's realistic. You don't just expect that I want $1,000 now, so I'll get $1,000 now. So knowing that is a good way to plan from a young age how to make a goal and set a realistic expectation. With adults, as you get older, it becomes, maybe I want to buy a place on my own. So then you think, well, I have to get a job. And then is it in a job in a city that I like, that I'd want to live there? Because if it's going to be in one city and then I want to live in another city, I'm not really going to be saving much money because I have to travel back and forth. So you have to start to kind of budget and see what's a realistic plan so that I can reach this goal in a safe way and in a realistic way where I don't have to take shortcuts or just like be frustrated because nothing's working out. So being informed, I think, is the bottom line here, with understanding, aligning with the divine, with God, is like basically what monotheism is. Anything that allows you to take a shortcut with people or with calling on the dead or with jinn or with making up something to kind of make up a story and make someone believe it and then it's not there, is a scam. That's never going to help you work out in the long term. It's just a short-term gain with long-term really bad results. So something to keep in mind.